Okay, so Superman #1 by Brian Michael Bendis. So I was thinking about reviewing the Man of Steel, like the whole miniseries or just the last issue, because I wasn't happy about it, like a lot of people. But then this came out, and it's so much worse. It's so bad. Oh man. So it starts out well enough, like Superman decides he's gonna go find John and Lois, who are with Jor-El. He's taking them on some, trip through the cosmos. And, that was the really upsetting thing about Man of Steel, was that, we got Superman as a father and, with his family in Rebirth. And it was really cool. It was like a really fresh direction, and it felt like if the character... And then Bendis, decides to leave Marvel and come to DC, and they're like, well, I guess we're giving him Superman because that's what he wants. So, Thomas and Gleason are out, Dan Jurgens is out, Bendis takes over, and, it's natural for a writer to want to wipe the slate clean and start with a fresh, slate, but it's just really frustrating. So, in this issue, it looks like, well, maybe he's gonna, go find him, and we'll get him back sooner than we thought. So then, on the way there, he sees a big fleet of Dominators headed toward Earth, and he attacks them to stop them from attacking Earth. So he fights them off, which, it's kind of fun, but it's pretty brief. And then after fighting them, he basically realizes, like, oh, this is why, I couldn't go with them in the first place. I have to defend Earth. So he decides not to look for him, and he goes back. So the whole thing is just kind of pointless. That's like the first couple pages. And then we get 2 pages of Superman moping around. Because, that's why we all love Superman Returns, right? Because we want to see Superman moping around. So then, he says goodbye, or whatever, to the Fortress of Solitude, which was destroyed by Rogol-Zar, along with the Justice League. And then, so in Man of Steel, what was it, number 4 or 5? We had Flash saying things like, caca-poo-poo. Now all of a sudden, he's swearing. New York is expensive as hell. So, yeah, that's real consistent writing there, Bendis. And then Superman goes and creates a new Fortress of Solitude in the Bermuda Triangle. And then begins smiling. So, he was moping around a few pages ago. Now he's smiling. So, pick a tone, Bendis. Like, either this is, sad, mopey Superman, or it's, optimistic, fun Superman. Like, you can't have it, you're kicking it too, okay? So then, he writes a story for the Daily Planet, or he starts writing a story about the new Fortress of Solitude, and then he decides it's too egotistical, so he's not going to do it. And then Martian Manhunter shows up. And this is where the comic just enters into Looneyville. So Martian Manhunter tells Superman that when he first came to Earth, the Flash, said that they were cut from the same cloth, but he didn't think so because Superman's planet was destroyed, in an accident, an ecological disaster, whereas, John Jones lost his people through genocide. So he says, well, now that we found out that Rogol-Zar actually destroyed your planet and it was genocide, now we have something in common. So we can be buddies now. So it's like, what is that? Like, I can't be friends with people, I can't be close to them unless they lost their whole culture through genocide? Like, I mean, I understand that, like, maybe it'd be hard to relate to other people, but, I mean, this is just nonsense. So then, in the middle of this conversation, Superman keeps leaving to go, like, fight monsters and save people from fires, and, that's kind of fun. The dialogue isn't very good, but whatever. And then Martian Manhunter proposes to Superman that, the world is, all messed up, and, people are putting up borders, and, blah, blah, blah. And people need to unite and enter the intergalactic community. And Superman should lead the charge because he's like a refugee, from another planet, and he's, sort of Earth's ambassador to the stars. And then he actually suggests that Superman take over the world. Like, look at this. He says, take it over, all of it, and set it toward a future in which hope isn't just an ideal. And then Superman's like, take? Like, Martian Manhunter is suggesting that Superman take over the world. I mean, like, he kind of corrects himself. He says, offer yourself. Watch the world rise up. And then Superman's all like, I love you, John, but it was really good to see you. And then he just kind of awkwardly leaves. And he says, I'll think about it. And then Martian Manhunter's like, I know the answer. Like, what? Does Bendis want to make Martian Manhunter into a dick too? Like, he already did it with Jonathan Kent. So then, at the end of the story, Superman's flying through Metropolis, and then this sort of blue haze descends over everything, and he realizes that Earth is now in the Phantom Zone, and that's how the story ends. Okay, so the main thing with this book is just like, there's no story. This is supposed to be sequential art, right? Like, I understand that it's serialized, but I should still get some semblance of like a beginning, a middle, and an end when I buy a comic for $4. Superman in the story, he goes to find his family, and then he fights the Dominators and decides not to. Then he builds a new Fortress of Solitude. Then he goes and talks to Martian Manhunter and saves a bunch of people and has this sort of interrupted conversation. And then at the end of the book, we find out that the Phantom Zone has taken over Earth. Like, Earth is now in the Phantom Zone, just out of nowhere. So it's basically like a bunch of different things happen. None of them are related. There's no through line. It's just the strangest thing. Like, the book, it reads so choppy. Not just because of the tone, as I talked about, but just because there's no story. It's just like one thing happens, and then another thing happens, and then another thing happens. None of them are related. It's just, it's so awful. Bendis should know how to write better comics than this, right? I mean, he wrote Ultimate Spider-Man for 15 years, right? Like, oh my gosh.